Join internationally acclaimed overland expert Paul Marsh and award-winning journalist Gregory Simpson as they delve into all things responsible overlanding. From choosing the right vehicle, getting yourself prepared, getting your vehicle prepared, safety tips, and much, much more. Only on Responsible Overlanding.
Do you find sometimes people rely too much on GPS and not rely on their own sensors?
Yeah. GPS is a wonderful tool, and I think it's great to use a GPS when you know you're looking for a place specifically. But I do feel that there's absolutely a room for a good map, and get the enormity of where you're going and what's around you, and understand what you're going to see. That you don't find yourself just following a little screen and not connecting with the rest. And that's the problem with technology. Any form of technology, whether it's our phones, your tablets, our PCs, GPSs, they disconnect you from what's around. You've seen, how many times have you walked into a restaurant and you've seen a couple and they're both on their phones? I want to go and pull the phones out there and say, hey, just talk to each other. Exactly. You may not have each other. So there's a place for it. Okay, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I think when you're on trips in it, it's really important that you balance that out. That technology doesn't overrule the whole experience. And a GPS is one of those devices that can absolutely create this. I had a couple years ago, and they'd had all their maps and books stolen on their trip, and they were gutted. I mean, you imagine, they broke in, maps, books gone, everything. A long time ago. But they came back, and when I spoke to them, they said, you know what, we didn't replace our maps. We didn't replace our guidebooks. We actually stopped and spoke to people and asked them where we should go. We saw more places that most people don't get to see because they were more off the beaten track that locals knew about. And we had better interactions with people. So how was that?
Isn't that the whole point of overlanding, to get lost sometimes?
Well, I think they don't say the road less traveled, the road less traveled takes you many, many different directions. And that's also a concept to think about. Don't be afraid of getting lost. Don't be afraid of going down the road that you may have to turn back on. Because in doing so, you're going to stretch yourself. And that's what we want to do in life. We don't always want to go the sure tar road, because you don't get the same experiences. So it's when you've gone down that road and you've found that you've got stuck and you've had to stop in a little village and you've had to ask for help and you've been able to share an experience. That's the heartwarming stuff that you come away with. The smiles that you see, the people who generally have got time. That's what's humbled me on my travels, especially in Africa. People have time. And if there's one thing that is so important to me, it's time. Time to be, time to do, time to experience. Time.
Isn't that one of the biggest misconceptions about Africa, that it's such a dangerous place? And you go into these little villages and the people want to help you.
I always say it to people, they say, how dangerous is Africa? God, it's really got to be dangerous. And I said, once you leave north of Johannesburg, it actually gets safe. And I've got a lot of clients I send into Zimbabwe. I love Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, I would walk around, that people are amazing. As you know, they're just beautiful souls, and they just walk around. They'll help you any day. And it really, you can get bad situations in any country, but more often than not, people draw that onto themselves, or they go in ignorant. So it is important to be aware of certain things, but don't be paranoid, because you will find, if you're in small villages, take time to stop, take time to engage with the people. You'd be surprised.
Slow down a bit.
Slow down, open the windows, put the arms out, wave, shake people's hands, look them in the eye. It's just, that's the beauty of taking that time. And I've got a guy I work with on the classic car rallies. His name's Bruno. And Bruno runs a really good classic car rally company, and he's amazing with children. He's just this, he could be a father to the world's children, he really could. He's with his camera, he jumps out, he gets involved with the kids, and he has fun with them, and man, you just see smiles all around. And I can just see how that really lights him up. He just loves kids. And that's one of his passions, to go and experience and enjoy the time with the children. And it's just great.
Is that a responsibility of the overlanding community to give back to the communities they drive through?
I think it's very difficult to give back to.
Just to give back, even if it's a wave or a smile or a handshake.
Yeah, I think that's
and not to drive on.
Yes. No, I think the responsibility we should take on board is to create awareness of what's out there. You know, we're privileged to be able to get into a vehicle and go and experience overlanding in remote places of Africa and the world. And I think the responsibility should be to come back and share with the rest of the world what's out there. For those who can't, you know, Andrew is an amazing storyteller. He goes to different parts and he comes back and he films it beautifully and he puts it out there. And that's for me very, very special, because you're taking people who maybe can't get out there, who haven't had the opportunities, who can sit back and be a part of that world. And that's probably the biggest responsibility. And in being in that point where you are actually experiencing it, the biggest responsibility, I think, is to engage. Engage with yourself and engage with the people. That way you're going to get more out of it. You take away a memorable experience and you come back with something that is etched into your soul and etched into your heart with what you've shared. And it's not just a memory in your mind. You know, I say try and get out of your mind and try and get into the soul and the heart of that. You know, we talk about Africa, and Malawi was always known as the heart of Africa. Big heart, big people, big smiles, big warm. But think of that when you're traveling. You know, think of getting into your heart of the heart of what you're doing, the heart of travel. And it does take you out of your mind. It takes you, you know, you need to feel Africa. You need to feel the travel when the road you're driving, you know, the road less traveled, the dust and the dirt. And you need to feel all that, and that becomes real.
Do you ever get any motorcycling overlanders coming to you for advice?
Oh yeah, I do.
And, do people get even closer to the action because there's no?
No, it's different. You know, it's very different. I think you're right. If you have to cycle on a bicycle, your experience is going to be very different. And people really respect that. You know, the locals know what it's like to ride a bicycle and how far it is. It's not easy. So, you know, cycling is going to be absolutely a different experience to a motorbike, to a four-wheel drive. Certainly when you're not encased in a vehicle, you are more exposed to the elements, to the people, and you haven't got a choice. You stop and it's you and your bike or bicycle, and so you will be forced by that nature to connect more with people. And often you hear these guys have some incredible experiences, and sometimes solo travelers too. You know, I've built vehicles for guys who go up and travel solo, you know, and it's just lovely to see, because they have a different experience as well. They have to put themselves out there, so they have to take the time to engage, otherwise it's very lonely. And they do, and they end up picking people up to give them lifts, and they end up engaging in conversation more than they would if you're a couple. Because often if you're a couple you can become a recluse and just do your little thing. So it's important not to put yourself out there, and to go and walk around the campsite if you're with other campers, and engage with them as much as you engage with the local people along the way that you can take time for.
So do you sometimes recommend to go solo to bring yourself out of your shell a bit?
I think it's a difficult one. I wouldn't say I recommend it. I think it has to come from someone who wants to do it. It's a tough call. It's a big decision. It's you know, you run certain risks. If something happens to you, you are by yourself. You've got to put certain safety things in place, which we discuss and talk about as far as traveling alone. Because you could have a simple slip, fall, hurt yourself, and hey, you know. So it is about being a little bit more mindful, or a lot more mindful actually, on how you would travel.
And which roads you can contact.
Yeah, it's, you know, people will probably not always know that when they're traveling, as to the extent of is it dangerous or not. It's not so much the danger.
Or more getting bogged in soft sand or something like that.
Yeah, that's true. You know, but you know, if you get bogged, it's more about I'm solo, I need to be, you know, more prepared.
Yeah.
But let's face it, today people carry, you know, they carry devices, so you never really.
Max tracks, the windshield.
You've got recovery, extrication aids, but more so you've got sat phones, and you've got spots, and you've got EPIRBs, and you've got all kinds of devices that if it really was a problem, you can get help. It's not like, you know, you're going to be left to die. The dangers come when you're stuck and you leave your vehicle. You know, we talk about that. You don't ever leave your vehicle if you're really stuck. And, you know, so it's always around the parameters of being well organized and mindful that you're on your own, and if you did have to hurt yourself, you need to have something you can activate. And the spot is a little device that you can push a button and someone will know exactly where you are, and it'll you know, ask for help.
And back when you were starting out, a shovel and
you know, I was when I started out, there was a great guy. He had a motorbike company, Ray Muller. Those of you who know him know he was a legend in motorbiking. And Ray loved taking BMW motorbikes with groups of people into Africa, and he did it well. And I remember sitting down with him and sharing information and knowledge, and he was just so generous with his time. And at that time, you didn't know what to take. I mean, yes, I had Max Tracks, well, not Max Tracks, I had steel, I think the steel plates. We didn't have the luxury of Max Tracks. And you had shovels, and I couldn't afford a fancy vehicle, and I made a lot of mistakes building my truck up, and far too much weight, and you forget that you can buy stuff in Africa. But you didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know, and there were very few people who could give me a lot of knowledge and experience. And with sanctions that were imposed on South Africa at that time, you couldn't drive past into Tanzania. So you were very limited where you could go with the sanctions imposed. And once Nelson Mandela came into power, it changed radically, and that opened up, and you were able to travel more, and people welcomed you more. So yeah, it's different. It's different. It's people who've travelled in the early days have had their own challenges, but it's quite interesting to reflect back on. I can get an email and a WhatsApp and whatever when I'm travelling now. And those days you had to go and queue at a post office for post restant, and post restant, for those who don't know, anyone could write a letter to the General Post Office, General Post Office, Nairobi, Kenya, and put your name on. And you go stand in a queue, post restant, and they pull out this long box and they look for M. Marsh and or something. They'll pull out, there's a letter for you. Now that could have been there a month, 2 months, however long. And that's how you got mail when you were travelling.
Sounds more romantic than it.
It's very romantic, and pain in the arse too.
Yeah.
But it was fun, those are sort of different experiences.
And do you ever get, I'm assuming you get it sometimes where the husband or the wife is pushing for the build, and the other partner eventually becomes more interested in overlanding than the person who brought them to the party?
The big challenge when you've got two people who are at different places, it's about bringing them together. It's about the inclusion. If you're starting a project, when you build a house, one person's driving one element of it and the other person's doing something else. And I like to think that I can bring people onto the same page, because I think by bringing them onto the same page, they get to support each other. And in supporting each other, it becomes a team effort. And that's what you need to do when you travel. It needs to be a team effort. It's not about right and wrongs. It's not about who does what. It's about both being able to sort of overlap as a team. So if I can't drive today, you can drive. And if I need some help doing this, and yes, people generally have their roles that they may be better at. One is better on the vehicle and better at checking the vehicle, and it's not always the guy, trust me. Sometimes the women are really sharp. And it's amazing, because I've had women with some amazing ideas. If you've got a challenging problem, you want a woman's mind involved, because they come up with some very interesting solutions. And I like to think that the combination of both putting it in together, then it becomes a really nice build. And that's why it's very important for me that people do, and then look at their interests. So okay, the vehicle is only one aspect, we're getting that done. So what are your interests? And you'd be surprised how people have come out of their life, maybe retired, and now it's a different chapter. And I say to people, this is a new chapter. Let's get excited about writing the new chapter. Forget the fact, I hate the term retired. Retired it's gone. It's a staid old term. Change your energy, change your direction, start a new chapter. It's as exciting as what you've done for the last 20 years. And let's see what your interests are that you can bring into this chapter. And let's see. So someone might be painting, might be sketching. On one expedition, the doctor with me she was brilliant. She used to sketch freehand and then watercolor. So if I was busy on one of the vehicles sorting something out, she'd be on the roof there with a sketch pad and watercolors, and it's just, that was her free time when she wasn't looking after people on a big rally. We really found, and I do say to people, take that time, it's your time, make it and build it into your day, because you do set up a routine when you travel. And that's why it's difficult when people ask folk to come and join them in their own vehicle. I kind of discourage.
There's not enough space.
Well, I like to think that you build a vehicle and not make enough space, to be honest, without being, it depends on the type of trip you're doing, but if it's a long distance overland trip, it's far better for people to have their own trucks, because you do build a routine, you do get to know your space, And then when you have someone else in your space,
And there's not much space to start
well,
with.
it's a small space, but then it becomes difficult to include
Yeah.
other people, you know. And some do it very well, and sometimes. So there's always lots of discussions around that.
And it also helps having two vehicles in a recovery situation.
You know, yes and no. I mean, it certainly does. If you've got two vehicles in a recovery situation, you're absolutely right. It does make it easier. It gives people the confidence to travel
And
deeper
yeah,
and maybe go deeper into areas that they wouldn't necessarily do. But I do think that traveling like that, you do need to, if you're going to do it for extended periods of time, you know, going for a long trip, I tend to ask the people to prepare themselves separately. Travel together and be prepared to give some time out if you need it, because it can be quite stressful. You know, if you want to get to know someone, take them hiking, take them overlanding, and you take away all those facades, you take away all the parameters that most of us define ourselves with. And when you've got all those parameters stripped away from you, you're kind of standing there a little bit naked, you know, in a sense, and going, well, this is me now.